Stonebound. Shifters Forever Worlds. By L. Thorne. Part 1.
Chapter 1. Tino, born Cristiano, son of Ella Carrera, Italy's most famous opera singer, took long strides down the streets of Rome. He was oblivious to the admiring glances of others, this handsome, chiseled-faced man with a strapping chest and muscular arms. He was a man on a mission, and not the most pleasant of ones. If Tino could have had his way, he'd have stayed sunk into a state of solitude and avoided people. Not that he minded people. Not at all. But he was grieving, and grief was something he preferred to handle privately. He took a deep breath, his chest expanding, the fabric of his shirt straining, then he released the air with a long whoosh. Might as well get it over with. Then what? Then back home. Back to his studio, back to sculpting. He pulled on the heavy door, stepped inside the plush office building, where dimness and the scent of cinnamon greeted him. The lady at the front desk, hair pulled back in a severe bun offset by stark red lipstick on a pale face, nodded to him and reached for a button. Tino knew the button would send a signal, and that seconds later he would find himself in the company of one of his mother's lawyers. Sure enough, a door opened less than a moment later, and an elegantly dressed black-suited pinstriped white-haired man stepped out. A man Tino knew well enough, considering he was a regular attendee at Tino's mother's performances. Cristiano, the law firm's partner, approached Tino. "I'm sorry for your loss." He indicated the door he'd just come out of. Tino stepped into the office of his mother's lawyers. He was here for the reading of the will. What's the purpose of that? I'm her only child. It was a formality he could have done without. He'd have preferred to stay at his mother's other villa in Florence and worked, or moped. He'd rather not have come to Rome. She was more than his mother. She was his best friend. She understood him, stood by him, raised him, educated him. In a time when many women married just to provide security or a home for their children, his mother chose to go it alone. Thank you, Roberto. It's the world's loss, though her memory will live on with her many fans. True enough. Roberto ushered him into his private suites, whispered to his secretary to bring cappuccinos and biscotti, and closed the door behind them. Why did I have to leave Florence to be here for this? Couldn't it have been handled without me? Special instructions from your mother. She wanted you to read the letter here. Letter? I thought I was here for the will. What letter? One for your eyes only. So you don't know what it says. It's sealed, son. Roberto had called him son since Tino was a young boy. It was weird hearing a man calling him son, one that wasn't actually his father. Roberto held up a cream-colored envelope with Tino's name on it. Not his nickname. His given name. Cristiano. There was no last name on the envelope. He recognized his mother's elegant handwriting, but didn't reach for the envelope yet. How long ago did she give it to you? On your birthday. She's given me one every year on your birthday. Has done so since you turned one. Where are the other letters? She took them with her. Roberto pushed the envelope toward him, nodded encouragingly. Read. I'll take it with me and read it at home. The conditions were that you read it here. Frustration ate at Tino. Or else. He didn't want to read the letter. It seemed nothing good could come of something like this. Roberto sighed, his forehead creased with a slight frown. Please. Tino reached across the desk, plucked the letter from Roberto's waiting fingertips. Roberto dropped his hand immediately, then as if it was an afterthought, took a letter opener from an organizer, and slid it across the sleek mahogany desktop. Thank you. He slid the burnished metal tip under the envelope seal and dragged it across the length of the envelope, then withdrew the trifold papers within. He glanced at Roberto, who was studying him. Raising his brows, Tino cleared his throat. I thought I'd stay, Roberto said. That's a written condition. More like something I mentioned to Ella. That I'd look after you. I think I can handle this. Tino kept his tone even. He knew Roberto was in love with his mother. He also knew Roberto would go to extremes his mother wouldn't have expected. Roberto nodded and left the room, closing the door behind him with a soft click.
Chapter 2. Anna, born Capriana Valenti, held her breath as she eavesdropped at her parents' bedroom door. Something a child would do, not a 20-year-old. But she was too afraid to go in. The doctors were in there, and she could tell from the way they were talking that whatever they were saying to her mother wasn't good. The sounds of soft sobs came through the thin door. They were followed by sounds of comfort being given. She knew her mother's sobs. She'd heard them before. That's a bad sign. But Anna didn't need the doctors to tell her what was wrong. Anna was a tigress shifter. Her tigress had already sensed that her father didn't have long to live. Hey. Anna startled, then whirled to face her sister Isabel. Jesus. Could you be quiet? Why? So you can get away with eavesdropping and not get caught. Anna threw Isabel a scowl. Why don't you just go in there? Just like Isabel. Always the bold one. Why don't you just go away? Isabel gave her a scalding look, put her hand on the knob and turned it. She took one step into the room, then turned, grabbed Anna's hand and pulled her in with her. Anna tugged backward, but it was too late. Isabel had caught her off guard, and they were already several paces into the room. Ahem. Their mother was at their father's bedside. She put her finger over her lips and gave them a warning look. Silencio. Sorry, Mama, Anna whispered, tossing Isabel a dirty look. Her father lay on the bed, his eyes closed, the sheet pulled up to his chest, his hands and arms veiny, emaciated by his side on top of the sheet. Pain ripped through Anna. Her father, the once robust and amazing man who'd had the largest hands and had tossed a giggling Isabel into the air and caught her, while beside him Anna had begged to be next. Gone was the vibrant man of last year. In the sickbed of her father's room was a husk of the man he used to be. She cast her gaze away. It was too painful to see her father like this. To know it was destroying her wheelchair-bound mother. She didn't pay attention to the doctors. She'd seen them there many times before. They'd been a common occurrence since her father took sick. But there was someone else in the room. Tall. Brutally, cruelly handsome, with a gleam in his eyes that made her want to hide. Or run. Probably run. Bruno Virgo has come calling, their mother said. Anna had heard that name. Her father had mentioned him before, but she couldn't remember the context of what her father had said about the tall, broad-shouldered man. Ladies. Bruno's eyes had remained locked on Anna. He licked his lips, thick tongue leaving bulbous lips glistening with saliva. An image of a slug's trail on the garden stones on a spring day came to Anna's mind. She pushed the image away and fought the urge to squirm from his scrutiny, while at the same time she fumed at his blatant sexual innuendos and at this intrusion on her father's time. My father is a sick man. You're here on business? She kept her voice deliberately cold. Your father asked me to come. He smirked and leaned closer to Anna. You'll belong to me one day. His words were spoken low. His eyes glazed over with lust. Mine. To do with as I please. Again the thick tongue made an appearance. Anna looked away, disgusted. She wanted to slap the smug expression from his face. It's true, cara mia. Her father's weak voice came from the bed. His eyes were barely open, slits that didn't seem to be able to focus. I'm glad you're here. I'm worried about your mother, Isabel, and you. Bruno will help. Bruno nodded. His eyes were focused on Anna's breasts way too intensely. She shifted from foot to foot, fighting yet another urge to vomit. How will he help exactly? Isabel's tone was just as cold as Anna's had been. Neither of the sisters had ever liked Bruno, from the first time he stopped by their house for business with Papa. His lascivious glances and covert lewd assertions made them shudder. They hid upstairs in their rooms as soon as they heard his raucous laughter coming from the front hallway. Your father has offered your hand in marriage, in exchange for the financial and emotional security of your family. Bruno was looking directly at Anna when he said that.
Chapter 3. Tino unfolded the thick parchment-like paper. The first thing his senses picked up was the scent. It was his mother's. It can't be that long since she wrote it, if it still smells like her. He glanced at the writing. Long hand, almost like calligraphy. That was one thing he could always identify about his mother. Her handwriting had been meticulous and an art form in and of itself. He glanced at the date on the top. 6 weeks ago. His 21st birthday. With a deep breath, followed by a long exhale, he began to read. My Cristiano, my son, the light of my life. You've been more than a son to me. You've been my best friend. I guess that comes from having a child when I'd barely reached adulthood myself. I've written you 1,000 letters, I think. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Where are the letters? It doesn't matter. The only letter that matters is this one. And don't harass Roberto for the previous letters. A smile crept to Tino's lips. His mother knew him too well. You've asked 1,000 times maybe who your father is. You've always wondered about that side of yourself. It's time now to share that with you and to help you protect yourself. Yes, Cristiano, protect yourself. Brace yourself, my son, for I have a story to tell you. And then I have to beg for your forgiveness. I knew not how else to handle the situation that I found myself in when I had you. You were more than an average baby. So much more. A sound at the door drew Tino's attention from the letter. A soft knock came again. He turned the letter face down on the tabletop. Enter. He expected Roberto, but instead it was his secretary with a tray, a pitcher of water, an empty glass, and the cappuccino and biscotti Roberto had ordered earlier. The secretary glanced at his face with concern, and Tino realized he'd been scowling. He wiped the look away and replaced it with nonchalance. Thank you for the coffee. She nodded, murmured a low welcome, then backed out of the room. Tino glanced at the coffee, but opted for water, pouring himself a glass and taking a long sip, then immediately returned to his reading. The first time I knew something was wrong. She'd crossed out the word wrong. The first time I knew something was off was when you were 6 months or so and still teething. I'd given you a piece of meat from my plate, and you bit down with a ferocity, as if you were starving. That wasn't the problem. The problem was your teeth were sharp and pierced my skin. The next day, I took you to the doctor for a checkup, and to find out if this was normal, for how would a little one have baby teeth that more closely resembled fangs? I didn't tell the doctor about the discovery the day before. Imagine my surprise when he looked in your mouth, and the sharp tooth I'd seen there the day before was again a blunt baby tooth. I was confused. Barely 19 and unsure what to do and who to talk to. Tino was confused too. What did this have to do with his father? I couldn't talk to your father. I'd never told him about you. Well, our story is another one. This one is yours. A few months later, this incident was long forgotten. I was busy with you, with whom I was enamored, and performing, which I managed to juggle with the help of an occasional nanny. One of those nannies was Rena. Rena, as I found out later, had a cousin who was a witch. Now, I can see you wondering what all this has to do with you. I'm getting there. You know, I was never good at telling a story without meandering through paths and detours. God knew that was true, Tino thought. It had created many moments of mirth, the way his mother could never get to the punchline of a joke or the point of a story. Rena and I were playing in the garden with you one morning. We were on vacation in the countryside, at a villa one of my fans had offered to us for the week. You were thrilled by the ball we were tossing about, gurgling and laughing. And then you fell silent. You stared into the bushes and made the strangest growling sound. It was strange because it didn't sound remotely human. Then, to my shock, your face began to change, it grew wider, and peculiar noises came from your body. Sounds of creaking, stretching, popping, and you cried out a fierce grunt. I knelt, sweeping you into my arms and holding you tightly. But you wriggled, pulling free. Then, before my very eyes, you became a lion cub. My child. My son. My baby was now a lion cub. You growled at the bushes, and a red fox darted out and ran away. Then you began a process of switching back to your human form. Again with the creaking sounds, the body changing, stretching, contracting. You were crying, inconsolable. I can only imagine, it must have been sheer agony. I held on to you, as confused as you, watching my child suffering alongside you. I glanced up at Rena, ready to beg her not to tell anyone what she'd witnessed, unsure what would happen if she did, ready to do whatever I had to in order to protect you. Rena's gaze was steady. You didn't know, she said to me matter-of-factly, as if she knew I didn't know. As if it wasn't important that you'd turned into a lion cub, but rather that I didn't know you'd done this. I shook my head at her. I did not. What, do, where, how? I had so many questions, but I couldn't compose a single one. Rena wrapped her arms around you and me. Your little one is a lion shifter. His father must have been one. One thought ran through my mind. If your father was the same thing as you were, when he turned into an animal, he would be a full-grown, very dangerous lion. I decided at that moment I had to keep you a secret from him. He'd want you. He'd claim you. I'd be powerless to keep you from him. Your father, you see, is the very wealthy shipping magnate, Marco Ricoletti. And clearly, he's a lion shifter. Oh, as that sweet baby that you were, sobbing in my arms while my tears merged with yours, one thought came to me. Protecting my son. I looked up at Rena, and I knew she could see the resolve in my eyes. Rena nodded. We will take care of this. We will protect him. That was all Rena had to say. Then she took me to her cousin, Esme. Esme, dear Tino, was a powerful witch. With Esme's assistance, a spell was cast upon you that kept your lion at bay. You were now a normal baby. And you grew into a normal child, and then later, as you are now, a normal man. So why am I sharing this with you? With me gone, there is no one to get the spell renewed. Esme's spell, which kept your lion away, had to be recast every year. She couldn't, or wouldn't, I'm not sure which, make the spell permanent. So every year I'd visit her. Yes, when I told you I was going to the country for a weekend with the girls, I was traveling to Rome to visit Esme and pay her for the extension of the witchcraft that kept you from being your father's son. It's your decision now, if you want to be what you have been, or if you want to explore the world of your father. I wish I knew more about it, but Rena didn't know, and Esme said that shifters kept to themselves and kept their ways and secrets private. Cristiano, forgive me, sweet son. Forgive me for my deception. Forgive me for never bringing it to light. Once started, I never knew if I should keep it a secret from you or make it part of your life. I hope I chose correctly. But in the event I did not, I apologize and seek your clemency. Be merciful and know, when you judge me, that everything was done out of love. Your loving mother. Always. Tino sat back in the chair. The arm seemed to almost reach around him, as though trying to embrace him. He held the letter at arm's length, eyeing it like one would a dangerous snake. Lion. He glanced at the downy hairs on his arms. Hardly hairy enough to be a lion man. His mother was talking about this as if he could be a werewolf. No. Not werewolf. That would be a werelion. A scoffing laugh escaped him. As if that shit really existed. He knew his mother had been sick, she'd been stricken with cancer, and it had progressed quickly, fiercely, and mercilessly to her brain. Maybe Mom wasn't all there when she wrote this. He pushed the thought aside. Who wanted to have a thought like that? More than ever, now he felt the need to be alone. Rising to his full height, well over 6 feet, he tucked the letter in its envelope, folded the envelope in half, and slipped it into his pocket. He'd read it again. Later, when he was alone.
Chapter 4. Anna crumpled the tissue into her fist and leaned against the dark wood of the desk her father had always used for business in their library at home. She let her eyes trail over the books. All of Papa's books. Who will read them now? The doctors had performed last rites on Papa. And yet, as close as he was to death, he had the resolve to keep asking for one thing. One thing and one thing only. And Anna had granted him that one wish. What else could I do? He's on his deathbed. Her mother's crying and praying that Anna would relent hadn't helped Anna's dilemma. Anna relented. Begrudgingly. Very much so. She shredded the tissue moistened with her grief and sorrow. Grief over her father's impending death. Sorrow over her looming nuptials. He's here, Isabel whispered, eyes glued to the rain-misted window. Outside the weather was dreary, rain falling in half-hearted spurts, just enough to ruin a day. Even the weather's miserable, just like me. Anna peeked around Isabel's shoulder. Sure enough, without an umbrella, walking as if he owned the place, Bruno Virgo, the bull shifter in an expensive tailored brown suit, shouldered his way up the walk leading to their front door. Following Bruno was a smaller man, clad in black, not nearly as expensive, but holding an umbrella above his balding head. Seconds later they were out of sight under the covered front door, and a demanding rap of knuckles on wood echoed in the front vestibule. A shudder rippled through Anna. She tugged the gray skirt down, smoothing the non-existent ripples out. At least you're not wearing white, Isabel snickered. Bruno would be pissed. He'd ordered that Anna be in white. Anna had donated every article of clothing in her armoire that was white. She'd be damned if she was going to give in to his demands. A loud roar of a laugh came from just outside the library, followed by another laugh that sounded more like a crow's caw. Where's my lovely bride? Bruno's voice came closer. Bile, viscous and thick, rose up Anna's throat. She pushed it back. Isabel wrapped her arms around Anna. At least we'll be together. Together. In hell. Bruno had graciously agreed to let Isabel and their mother stay with them. He'd agreed to give them a home, though the home would be the family home she grew up in. Why? Anna had hissed at her mother 2 months ago, after ensuring that her father was asleep. Why does Papa insist on this? He wants the family to have a man. A protector. Her tigress had growled at the insult of the old-school ways. As if I can't take care of myself. Just because society here was patriarchal and made women second-class citizens didn't mean that Anna couldn't handle the family businesses. She'd opened her mouth to protest, but her father's groans of pain had ended the conversation. So she yielded. She'd be the bull shifter's mate. The shudder was back. Anna's teeth chattered, but not from cold, no, not in the spring. Spring is supposed to be a time of hope. There she is. Bruno was standing in the doorway. The lecherous look he gave her bothered her, but when he turned that look onto her sister, Anna's tigress roared, pushing for a shift, wanting to hurt the bastard. He better not ever, Anna thought. Or I will let my tigress loose on him. She didn't want to stress her mother, especially not with Papa so close to death's door, so she plastered a smile on her face. Bruno turned his gaze back to Anna. His eyes narrowed as he took her outfit in, clearly looking for the white she was ordered to wear. Luckily he didn't say a word, as seconds later from the hallway came the sounds of her mother's wheelchair. Bruno. Welcome. Mama's voice came from behind Bruno. He whirled his bulk around. Madame Valenti. Thank you. My husband is just up from his nap. This would be a good time. I see you brought. Filippo will be officiating, Bruno cut her off. Seething, Anna took a step forward. Isabel grabbed her hand, squeezed, shook her head when Anna glanced at her. No, Isabel hissed in a whisper. Isabel was right. It was important to her parents that she go through with this, so that her father could feel that she would be taken care of. that the family would be taken care of. As soon as I can, I will have this annulled and take control of our companies. If he doesn't run them into the ground with his bull-headed ways. Let's go. Bruno's order was rough. Isabel winced and shook her head. Consider yourself lucky you won't have to share the nightly bed with him. Another shudder racked Anna's body. The ceremony was brief, thankfully. They clustered about Papa's bed, and vows were made. Vows that Anna didn't believe, and could hardly utter in agreement. Yet that's exactly what she did, with Isabel holding her arm tightly, reminding her that they were in this together. They hadn't spoken about it much. Isabel had been gone, preparing her ballet students for their recital. And if Anna were to admit it out loud, she didn't want to talk about it. She had wanted to pretend it wasn't real. But it is real. She was now Signora Bruno Virgo. She glanced at the ring Bruno had wrenched onto her finger with his thick, stubby hands. A heavy white gold creation that felt like a shackle had been placed on her hand. An even heavier one had wrapped itself around her heart. As Isabel, Anna, and Mama had been shuffled out the door, a group of men were waiting outside Papa's room. Anna recognized his lawyers. But she didn't know the other 4 men. Though they seemed to know Bruno. She glanced at her mother, a questioning look in her eyes. Men stuff, her mother said. Your father is seeing to our well-being. As if that answer was good enough. Anna frowned at Isabel, noting her sister was frowning as well. I'm tired. Mama's eyes were glazed with fatigue. I'm going to close my eyes in the sitting room for a short bit. Will you let me know when the lawyers are gone? I'd like to sit with your father. She didn't say it, but Anna knew she wanted to be there for his final hours. The doctor said no more than 24 hours. At the most, 36. Maria, let's go. Mama indicated to her nurse helper who waited by the door. Take me to the sitting room. On this gloomy day, I'll nap next to the window. As soon as their mother was out of hearing range, Isabel leaned in to Anna. What do you think the lawyers are there for? Anna grimaced. Helping Bruno find ways to screw Papa over. Hellfire. Isabel stomped her foot. Not if I have anything to say about it. Anna bit back the morbid laughter bubbling in her throat. As if Isabel could do anything against a gathering of shifters. Being a white tigress shifter meant nothing when faced with a room full of shifters at a shifter council meeting. I'm sure everything will be fine.
Chapter 5. Tino had read and reread the letter his mother left him. He returned to his solitary apartment next to his mother's villa in the countryside, and delved into his sculpting until his hands were aching and bleeding. He'd ignored attempts his friends made to get him to come out. He sent the help away, and told them to worry about the main house and leave him alone. His hair grew long, his mind went blank. He tried to process the information his mother had left for him. How could this be? He didn't believe it for a second. He couldn't. Tino should have been paying better attention. God knows, you don't sculpt and use sharp instruments to carve into the clay with half your mind elsewhere. But he wasn't. A sharp pain signaled the sliced skin on the inside of his arm. Blood spurted forth. The stinging pain was one thing, but the blood flowing from his body was another. He tried to staunch the flow. He tied a belt around his forearm, hoping that would lessen the blood loss. To no avail. He watched the crimson life-giving liquid leaving his body and pooling on the floor. As if mesmerized, he couldn't move and didn't think to seek help. He had no death wish. This wasn't the problem. By now he'd lost enough blood that he couldn't think straight. The worst part was recognizing that, but being too weak to rise to his feet to go to the villa for assistance from the help. Are you fucking kidding me? I could die because of this. An anger seared through him, followed by a roaring sound. It felt like a wildlife show turned to full volume. The bellowing roars filled his head, made his ears ache, and his skull felt on the brink of imploding. A new stinging sensation on his fingertips took over, diminishing the throb from the cut. It felt like someone was yanking them out with pliers. Wondering why his fingers would hurt, Tino glanced down. He released a primal yell that drowned out the roaring in his head. No. No. The words were a grunted growl. His fingernails had changed. They'd grown darker and were lengthening into claws. This had to be worse than an acid trip. He fell to his knees, caught his fall with his palms and stayed there on all fours, staring at the black claws that extended from his fingertips. Are you fucking kidding me? That thought was interrupted by a creaking and stretching noise that sounded as if it were coming from within him. He doubled over in pain, landing in a fetal position, his eyes closed against the sheer agony of the experience. This had to be what it felt like to be drawn and quartered, or stretched on one of those medieval torture machines. He released a yell that turned into a scream that brought to mind a scene from a movie where a man had his still-beating heart ripped out of his torso. Tino raised his hands to his torso. Except that wasn't what happened. He didn't have hands anymore. He had furry paws attached to large knuckled legs. Lion legs. The pain continued, ripping through him with the force of a tornado holding a nail gun. And suddenly, it was over. Just like that. The pain was completely gone. And life was normal. Except, he glanced at the reflection in the large doors that led to the veranda. A fierce lion, dark-maned and broad-chested, stared at him. Only that lion was him. A flash of fear coursed through Tino, but instantly vanished, and he couldn't imagine why his fear of the beast went away. Tino shook his head in confusion. In the reflection, the lion shook his head, mighty mane flowing from the effort, as if it were being windblown. Tino opened his mouth to talk, but all that came out was a chuffing sound. God. Now I can't talk. What if the help came in? I'm so screwed. They'd call the authorities, and... Dead lion. Dead Tino. Tino sat back on his haunches. Correction, he sat back on his lion's haunches. Now what? The lion cocked his head at the reflection. Wait. I didn't do that. He did it. You did it. Tino addressed the lion in his head. The lion roared. And crazy as it sounded to Tino, and he'd have no way to explain it if anyone ever asked, he understood exactly what the lion said. The lion asked if he was ready to listen to him. I am. Hours and hours passed. While Tino was in his lion's form, the blood stopped flowing and his body healed, as the lion explained was the way shifters healed. He told Tino about a hibernation process that would heal him, even if he was on the brink of death, in his lion form. The lion told him how he'd been suppressed by the witch's spell and kept at bay. The witch's spell had deteriorated enough so that when Tino was weakened, the lion could come forth. Now what? Tino asked the lion, confused about this uncharted territory. His lion told him he'd rather not be buried anymore. I don't know how to handle this, you, me, all of it. The lion grunted a chuffing sound, told Tino to find someone who could help him. Like who? Tino studied the full-maned beast half of himself in the reflection. Who the hell could help me with this without wanting to kill me? The answer came to Tino before his lion could tell him. My father. Of course, a lion shifter could help him with his lion shifting. With how to handle this, how to manage being both a man and a feline. In the reflection, the lion's eyes glowed amber with pleasure. I'll find him first thing tomorrow. Right after I get a haircut and make myself presentable. The lion growled. Tino was pulled from his thoughts, wondering what troubled the beast. Before he could ask what was wrong, the lion had leapt to his paws and was making for the other side of the room, heading toward the open French doors. I'm not sure this is wise, Tino tried to warn his lion. It would not bode well for them if someone saw him in this form. The lion assured him it would be a short excursion. He needed to run. Hadn't been given that which shifters needed, space to run. 30 minutes later, the sun set. After a short nap, beneath the shaded canopy of an olive tree near the brick wall that surrounded the villa, his lion bounded to his feet and loped toward Tino's apartment. Slipping inside the doors, the lion stopped and turned to face the reflection in the now darkened room. "I can see in the dark." The lion chuffed a small sound, then apologized. "For?" Tino asked. "The agony they'd have to deal with," the lion said. A tremor ran through Tino. A growl of pain came from his lion's lungs as the planes in his face shifted, as his body adjusted, shrinking, realigning, pushing him back into his human form. Tino looked down. He was fully human. Covered in his bloody clothes, except the clothing looked like he'd been wrestling with an army. Felt like he had too. His body ached, his head felt it was going to burst. "Are you there?" His lion responded with a low roar. So the lion stayed inside. "You'll always be in me." The lion snorted his agreement, unless Tino resorted to having a witch suppress him again. Never. Never again. Tino opened his mouth to speak, but all that came out was a dry hacking sound. He reached for a glass of water, downed it in a single gulp, and then tried again. What the hell? He could talk. Except his voice sounded like his lungs had been run through a cheese grater. "We have a busy day tomorrow. We have to find our father. Marco Ricoletti could help him, teach him the way of the lion shifters." Chapter 6. 2 days later, one day after he'd planned, Tino was on his way to find his father. He was freshly shaven and showered, and had paid the barber a visit, having him cut down the long hair and bring it to a more respectable buzz. He'd found Marco Ricoletti's address with the help of his mother's attorneys. That extended the delay in getting to Marco's. "I need to start thinking of him as my father, not as Marco. Maybe later." His father lived in a villa in Rome. All this time so close, and yet I never knew. Tino looked at the gates before him. Solid metal. In the distance, on a slight hill, the villa glowed in the morning light. The sun's rays highlighted the walls, glinting off the windows. He pressed the intercom button, and when a voice answered, he spoke. "Cristiano Carrera." The gate swung open. Cristiano slipped into his coupe and nosed the car slowly up the drive, fighting the urge to floor it, anxious to meet the father he'd never known. Eager to ask questions about his relationship with his mother. Sadness pierced Tino's core at the thought of his mother. God. He missed her. Would Marco miss her? Would he care? They clearly didn't keep in touch, or did they? No, he knew his mother wouldn't have done that. Tino put the car in park and bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. He paused in front of the door, deliberating if he should knock or ring the doorbell. He didn't have to make that decision. The door opened, and a dark-haired, green-eyed woman in a black, clingy calf-length dress studied him with a curious look in her eye. The housekeeper. "I'm Iniga." That didn't tell him much. "I'm Cristiano Carrera. I was hoping to see Marco Ricoletti." Tino glanced behind her, wondering where he was. "The nature of your business?" Tino frowned. That wasn't her business. Or maybe she was his personal assistant or secretary. "He's here?" Iniga shook her head. "He's not. I'm his wife. He's traveling. Away on business." Disappointment shot through Tino. "Oh. Maybe I should come back at another time, Signora Ricoletti." "Oh, nonsense. Come in for some refreshments." She tugged on his sleeve. Why not? She could tell him about his father. Maybe set up a get-together, break the ice even. 15 minutes later, on a plush wing chair across from the attractive woman, Tino had drunk half the cup of coffee. His lion snarled in Tino's head. He pushed the lion away. "It's a very good idea. I think she can help me." The lion's responding snarl was insistent and loud. Tino took a long draw off the coffee, then set the almost empty cup down. You never said what it was you needed from my husband, Signor Carrera. I'm sorry, Signora. Call me Inigo. Inigo. Tino rubbed his temple. His lion had quieted, but a strange wooziness had taken over. Could he tell her? Should he? She'd find out sooner or later from Marco later, if not from Tino today. It's awkward. I don't know how long you've been with Marco. He wasn't sure how to proceed. She frowned. Continue. Tino nodded, wishing he could shake the fuzziness away. Marco is your father. A grimace fleetingly crossed her face, then the sign of distaste was replaced with a blank expression. How? How did I know? The green in her eyes had a dangerous glint. He nodded. Why was his tongue paralyzed? You look exactly like him. What else could you be? And you are a lion shifter. We're a lion shifter. We're. What did she mean? He opened his mouth but no sound came out. Your lion is taking a long nap, Cristiano Carrera. She rose, her dress swishing as she took angry stilted steps, pacing about the room. What makes you think I want an interloper, ruining my plans? She was holding a vial made of glass. Tino watched the vial, transfixed as it caught and refracted light. He was becoming disoriented. Her words were fading in and out as Tino struggled to remain focused. Inigo knew about him. Knew about his lion. Then he realized. She'd sent his lion away. It was as if he... Fuck. Tino tried to reach out to his lion. Nothing. No luck at all. She's a witch. That's why my lion is gone. You fool, she whirled around. You will not ruin this. No. Tino couldn't focus. She was a fast-moving, fast-talking blur. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, before he could react, though he had no idea how he'd have reacted, Tino was gone. He was there. He could see her, but everything faded to black. Chapter 7. Tino came to with a start. Except there was a problem. He tried to move his hands, arms, legs, they moved. But he went nowhere. He opened his mouth. Spoke. Hey. Sound came out. But confusion set in. A roar in his head. His lion. Glad you're here. The lion chuffed a soothing sound, but Tino could hear the anger in his tone. I can't move. The sound of his own voice was comforting. A noise came from nearby. Tino glanced around, recognizing the surroundings. He was in Marco Ricoletti's sitting room. But it took Tino a moment to put it together. He could move about in a small area, but he couldn't leave. The sound came again. Soft laughter. Suddenly, Inigo appeared in front of him. You should not have come. I won't kill you and risk Marco's ultimate wrath should he ever find out, but I will keep you here forever. Where's here? Her face was unmoving. Was it possible he could hear her, and she couldn't hear him? Are you awake, lion shifter? She can't hear me. Can't she see me? I know you can hear me. She paused, a look of uncertainty on her face. If you're awake. Tino beat his hands against the walls that held him prisoner, pummeling with all his might. A frame fell off, smashed into several pieces with a loud crack. Inigo laughed. You are awake. You are. She clapped her hands, as if she'd accomplished something major. Enjoy your new home, lion shifter. Tino was stuck. He was stuck in the walls of the villa, traveling about the mansion within the old stone walls, a captive to the witchery that put him there. This can't last forever, can it? His lion was silent. A shadow crossed the room. Inigo. Since you won't behave, I've taken your lion away. If you show me you can be trusted, you can have him back. Otherwise, enjoy some alone time. Inigo. A deep baritone voice came from the other room. She whirled around. "Coming, my love," she called out, then turned back. "You behave," she whispered. "Where were you? I've been gone 2 days, and you don't seem very excited to see me." Tino caught the glimpse of a man, broad-shouldered, olive skin tone, before the man vanished from sight. Tino's acute hearing picked up their departing conversation. "Of course, I'm excited to see you. Let's go to the back veranda for some tea." Frustrated, Tino beat on the wall, causing a large painting to fall and crash into a small table, sending it flying. What the hell was that? Loud footsteps came from the hallway. "Are you entertaining?" Marco Ricoletti's tone carried suspicion. "You are silly. Look." Iniga appeared in the doorway. She waved her hands about the room. "See? No one. Only the mess from that picture falling." Marco appeared at the doorway. Tino stared at the man who was his father. The resemblance was eerie. Marco crossed his arms over a broad chest. How did the picture fall then?" Iniga stepped close to Marco and tiptoed her fingers up his chest to his neck. She wrapped her arms around him. "This place is haunted. I've been wanting to talk to you about selling it and moving." "Haunted? Are you?" Iniga burst into tears, though from his angle, Tino could tell she was faking. Tino beat on the wall to warn his father that she was putting on an act. A curio cabinet rattled. "See?" Iniga half smiled, vindicated. "Haunted? I won't live here. Not another day. Not a single night. Cara mia, you know I don't like to see you upset. We'll move. Immediately. We'll stay in my suite near the square, then find a suitable home for us. That isn't haunted." Iniga's smile was victorious.
Part 2.
Chapter 8. Tino's eyes opened, just as they had for months, or was it years now? He'd lost count of time. At least he had his lion for company, in the solitary prison he called home. At least the witch hadn't done anything to make the lion go away again. Shortly after Marco and Iniga had left, the lion returned. The villa sat empty for most of the months. Until one day, the sound of laughter filled the room. Female laughter. Tino's sound-deprived ears perked. A couple walked into the room. A large hulking man and a blonde woman with a short skirt and breasts like melons that were half on display. Tino studied the two. "What do you think, Melania?" The man smacked the woman on the ass. "It's lovely, Bruno. Your wife will enjoy it. Do you know what I'd like to enjoy right now?" The man pulled the woman close, then placed his hand on her head, guiding it down. She lowered herself to her knees. Tino averted his gaze when he heard the sound of a zipper, then the sloppy wet sounds followed by the man's grunting and a loud bellow of release. "Great. This is who my new roommates will be." It was later he learned that wasn't exactly the case.
Chapter 9. Anna pushed her mother's wheelchair toward the garden in their new home. Her mother had become weaker and weaker since Papa's death a year ago, and then even weaker after they'd left their home to come to the new villa on the outskirts of Rome. It broke Mama's heart that Bruno had decided they needed to move. When he and the realtor Melania had shown Anna and Isabel the villa, Isabel had protested, but Anna had wisely kept her mouth shut. She was too familiar with her husband's cruel ways when she angered him. She had the bruises on her body, where no one could see them, to show for it. She had the ripped and torn flesh between her legs where he'd mistreated her. Thankfully, he stopped that behavior when they'd arrived at the new villa. Now he performed a perfunctory duty with Anna, only when she was the most fertile, and even then only briefly. Anna knew why she no longer garnered his attention. Oh yeah. She knew. She knew there were other women. She saw the signs. But she was thankful, not jealous. She was thankful that his cruelties and passions were sated elsewhere. "I miss him, Anna." Mama's voice was pitifully weak. "I know, Mama. I miss Papa too. And I miss our home. That was our home all those years. Why did you want to move? Damn him, she cursed Bruno. Bruno had lied to Mama and told her that it was Anna's idea they move. Anna hadn't argued. She didn't want her mother dragged into anything that would stress her more than her life already did. But Isabel knew. Isabel knew way too much. She'd seen the way Bruno acted. She dragged Anna to their father's lawyers and asked them what it would take to divorce Bruno and retain their father's estate. The lawyers shook their heads sadly. There is no way. The paperwork was signed by your father. All of his property reverted to Bruno upon his marriage to you. No. I can't allow you to do that. That can't be true. Isabel wrung her hands. Oh, but it is. I have the paperwork. One of the attorneys began to shuffle through papers and files. Give it up. Anna rose to her feet, not one bit surprised. After they had left the attorney's offices, Isabel turned to her. What will we do? Plan. Anna and Isabel went for coffee to regroup. On the patio of a local cafe, under the shade of the canvas umbrella, Isabel and Anna sat next to one another, their chairs drawn close for privacy, even though they knew no one in the area. So what's the plan? Isabel asked. I will try to avoid getting pregnant. We will stay the course. We will make as few waves as possible. At least as long as Mama is alive. Tears glistened in Isabel's eyes. Her white tigress's presence glowed silver flames in the depth of her eyes, angry at the helplessness of their situation. I don't want to think like that. Anna was thankful that Bruno was gone more often than he was at home. She didn't mind the new house, although it was spooky the way that things seemed to fall off the walls every now and then. When she'd run into some neighbors, they had told her stories about the house being haunted. Anna had laughed. She didn't believe that for a second. I hate the new home, Isabel exclaimed. I feel like I'm always under surveillance. Do you think he has the place bugged? Anna giggled, then sobered. And the way things fall. Haunted. Isabel put down her coffee cup hard, liquid splashed over the top. Come on. You know ghosts aren't real. I know no such thing, Isabel hissed. Some think shifters aren't real. Point taken. Anna dipped the biscotti in her coffee, watched it crumble when she'd left it too long, didn't want to think of the parallel, what with how her own life had fallen apart. We can't do anything. We can't upset Mama. She's been through too much. Battling Bruno so that we could leave would wreak havoc. I know. Isabel frowned. Anna didn't like the look on her sister's face. What do you mean? Do you think I don't know what he does to you? How often he did it? Anna tightened her jaw, drawing her lips into a line. I don't care if he cheats. I'm not talking about the cheating. I'm glad he does that. I'm talking about the raping. Anna gasped. How could you think I wouldn't know? Anna couldn't speak. She looked at the plaza, little kids playing soccer, pigeons pestering tourists, old women talking to each other, hands flailing for emphasis as they argued points and disagreements that she couldn't hear. Finally, she shook her head and looked into her sister's eyes. I didn't know what to do. You should have killed him. And be charged with murder and punished if humans find out? It's even worse if the shifters find out. That would leave you and Mama where and with what means. You can't have his property if it's gained because of murder. The Shifter Council would never let that happen. I'd be in front of the Shifter Supreme Court immediately. Then I'd be sent to Wiz Scary. Wiz Scary. An island isolated, remote, where all shifters who were sentenced to life went, which was a long time for the shifters since longevity was a shifter trait. Hundreds of years spent in isolation on an island. Then let me kill him. Horrified, Anna dropped the coffee cup she'd just picked up. It clipped the edge of the table and careened to the concrete, smashing to pieces. Immediately, before Anna could say anything to Isabel, the waiter was there with a towel, sponging up the mess on the floor, using another towel to dab at the coffee on Anna's shoes. Thank you. Anna took the towel from him. I'll do this. As soon as he'd finished, she turned to Isabel. Never say that again. I can't have you at Whiz Scary. That would kill Mama. Let me deal with this. One day. Anna didn't want to say the rest. She didn't want to tell Isabel she would live with and deal with this life until her mother and Isabel were both out of danger. One way or another.
Chapter 10. Tino could not peg the moment he fell in love with the quiet beauty who lived in the villa that held him stonebound and prisoner. He watched her gentle ways with her mother. He noted the way she loved and cared for her sister. The only thing Tino could not handle was the way her husband addressed her. Tino feared that there was more to it than just the way he spoke to her. The way Anna flinched when Bruno approached spoke volumes, and made Tino burn with an anger that seared for hours. It also made his lion bellow so loudly in Tino's ears that he'd have a headache that persevered for days. Anna was the target of Bruno's irritation, and it would seem she was also the cause, even when she did nothing more than breathe. Today, Anna was in the sitting room adjacent to the bedroom she shared with Bruno. Tino was in the wall across from her, keeping a watchful eye over the woman he'd fallen for. The woman that his lion insisted was their fated mate. Tino still didn't understand the shifter ways, didn't understand how his lion said or did the things he did. He didn't understand anything. He wished he'd had a chance to train with someone familiar with these ways. Anna was sitting in a chaise lounge, perusing a magazine, when Bruno strode in the room. He had just returned from a business trip, not greeted anyone, then spent a minute on the phone. Now here he was, red-faced and blustery as always. He approached Anna. The doctor said this is good timing. Today is the day. Lucky I'm back from my trip now. Anna's beautiful olive skin faded to a pale bone white. Then 2 angry splashes of crimson colored her cheeks. A tiny snorting sound came from Anna, though her lips barely moved. It was a sound of disgust and disbelief, if Tino had to describe it. He didn't have a second to deliberate over the context or meaning of her snort, because Bruno had dropped his clothing on the floor and stood before her, naked and proud, his rod fully extended and swollen. Tino wanted to look away. There was no way he could watch this. There was no way he could sit by and witness the woman he'd come to love, granted another man's wife, but still the only woman he'd ever loved, while she had sex with Bruno. It would be too painful for Tino, even though he'd have never done anything to further their relationship if he weren't stuck behind these stone walls. He was no homewrecker. He respected the bonds of love and marriage. He was already slipping away to another room when the sound of flesh slapping flesh stopped him short. He had to look. That did not sound like passion. Not at all. Anna stood before Bruno, angry finger marks from a slap marring her skin. Bruno's hands were on his hips. I said, suck it. His voice was not loud, but it was dangerously threatening. I'm not some putana you found on the streets. You do not treat me that way. You're my bought and paid for putana. Make no mistake. What did you pay when you stole my father's fortune with your high-priced lawyers, Bruno Virgo? Bruno pulled one arm back, cocked, then released a punch that sent Anna into the wall behind the chaise lounge. She lay there, motionless. Tino couldn't contain himself. He shook the walls, making shelving and pictures fall. Mortar dust rose, and still the old walls of the villa held. Bruno turned to survey the damage. Damned earthquakes. Reaching down, he jerked Anna to her feet. Now. Strip. Get on the bed. Anna glared at him. I will not. You will. He cocked his arm again. Tino heard a sound he'd heard before. He knew that sound. The creaking and the stretching, the snapping. Yes, he knew that sound. But his shock was no less when before his very eyes, Anna morphed from the curvy, dark-haired woman to a black and vividly orange tigress. The tigress stood before Bruno. Tino didn't have time to absorb what had just happened. That now he knew another shifter. That now he was not alone in the world, except in his own Stonebound world. Bruno laughed at the tigress before him. She snarled. He laughed again. She bared her teeth at him. You think I am afraid of you, tigress? And then the sound again, the sound that Tino knew so well. Too well. Bruno shifted into his animal form. He stood before the luxuriously furred tigress, a large bull with lethal long horns. Hell, now there were two shifters crowding the room. The tigress growled. The bull grunted, saliva dripping from his lips. He tossed his head in the air, as if threatening. One large hoof pawed at the plush rug. And then the strangest thing happened. Tino felt it first. He couldn't describe the sensation, but he felt it. Then he heard it. Want me to have fun with your sister? How about your mother? Bruno's voice was in his head. You will do no such thing, or I won't be able to stop my tigress from killing you. Tino didn't know what made him do what he did next, for he knew that he couldn't communicate with anyone outside his walls. He couldn't communicate with Iniga. He couldn't communicate with his father's household servants, and he hadn't been able to communicate with anyone else who'd come to the house. And yet, driven by desperation at the cruelty in Bruno's voice, he spoke, his voice entering their silent communications. Do not threaten them, Tino said. Anna had opened her tigress's mouth as if preparing to roar, but Tino's words halted her. Her tigress eyes widened while the pupils contracted. Bruno's bull swiveled his head left and right. Who was that? He focused a glare on Anna. Anna cocked her head. I have no idea. Lying cunt. Bruno's bull jerked his head in her direction. The tip of one horn scored her shoulder deeply. Anna growled, reared back, ready to pounce. Do it, and your mother and sister pay. Shift immediately. The same sounds that Tino knew were the sound of shifting came as both Anna and Bruno shifted. Bruno, of course, was nude, as he'd been before he shifted. Anna was once more her luscious, beautiful self, except that she looked as if she'd been wrestling, clothes askew and rumpled. Her shoulder was bloody, though, and concern flared in Tino. I need to shift so I can heal, she told Bruno. Tino understood that now, since his lion had explained it to him after he'd shifted so Tino wouldn't die. So neither of them would die. Bruno stepped closer to Anna. Who was listening in? Who was that? Do you have a lover? Anna gasped. Anger left red streaks on her cheeks. What? You can heal later. He reached for her. Tino shook the walls, causing even the ceiling to shake, making the light swing. What the hell? Bruno stepped away from Anna, reached for his pants and pulled them on. I'll be back later. I'm going to the cantina. He grabbed his shirt and slammed the door behind him. I hope you pass out and stay with your whores for a week. A tear wound its way down her cheek. At least until I am not ovulating, you pitiful, miserable excuse of a man. Anna shifted, turning into her magnificent queenly tigress, her head held high, her body lean but thick with muscles. A dusky pink tongue came out, licking on the wound. Tino watched this woman that turned into a tigress, and with every moment he watched her, the deeper he fell. He knew he shouldn't have. But he couldn't help himself. Why are you with him? The orange tigress leapt to her paws, scanned the room, turning around slowly. Are you the ghost? I'm no ghost. How are we communicating like this? Tell me who you are, and I'll tell you. You first, Tino insisted. The tigress huffed. Sinking, it is linking our minds together to talk. It's the shifter way of communicating when we are in our animal form. But I thought our conversations couldn't be invaded without invitation. She sat, studied the wall as if she could see him. He wondered if she could. Surely not, or she wouldn't have asked if he were a ghost, he thought. Your turn, Anna added. I am a shifter. Where are you? Tino released a deep breath. Trapped in the wall. Where a witch put me. Do you have a name? What type of shifter? Cristiano Carrera. Ricoletti is my father's last name. It's a long story. My father is a lion shifter. After my mother died, I came to find him. Instead found his wife, a witch who put me here. The tigress cocked her head, studied the wall. You are the reason for the things falling. I am. Tino couldn't help the smile in his voice. It seems you've come to my aid more than once. Tino wasn't going to tell her. He also came to Isabel's aid when Bruno had paused outside her door more than once. I have a question for you. Uh-oh. He wasn't sure about the tone in her voice. You can see us, obviously. He nodded, then realized she couldn't see him. Yes. And when I was not dressed? Tino's lion growled. Truthfully. It looked like the tigress nodded. Only the first time. I'm sorry. I should have looked away. But he couldn't have. He was so entranced with her, from the beginning. After that, I never looked. Never saw anything inappropriate. This was true, though God knew he wanted to watch her shower and even more. And my sister. My mother. What the fuck kind of creep did she think he was? Never. Why don't you get out? Escape. If I could, I would have already. I haven't been able to talk to anyone. No one could ever hear me. I was shocked that you and the bullshifter could hear me. A shudder rolled over the tigress's fur at the mention of Bruno. You've been very helpful to me. I'm glad I could be. It would be nice if I could help you, too.
Chapter 11. Anna was anxious for her morning visit with Tino. She reached for the door handle. It had been a month now almost, and she'd spent time getting to know the man trapped in the wall. All Anna's life, Isabel had been the closest thing to a best friend that she had, but with Tino, she had a friendship that transcended the friendship she had with Isabel. It was a deeper friendship. And something else. Anna didn't want to say she flirted with him. She'd never seen him, had no idea what he looked like, how old he was, nothing. Nothing at all. Her tigress snarled. Yes, I know. Her tigress released a growl. Anna knew what her tigress thought, they were fated. Anna had never believed in that. I don't believe in shifter fairy tales, Anna had always told Isabel when they had talked about love and finding their mates. But this thing with Tino, these feelings. If Anna weren't mated. But I am. And I have to stay this way, as long as my family is in danger. Morning with Tino, while her sister and her mother would think she was having her coffee in bed. Afternoon naps weren't spent napping anymore. They were spent visiting with Tino, talking about their lives, his father, his mother. The first time he told her he was Ella Carrera's son, she gasped. I love her. I've loved her since I was a little girl. She's my favorite. My parents took me and Isabel to see her. I was so sad to hear that she'd passed. It was a difficult time for me, Tino had admitted. And everything fell apart after that. I discovered my lion, then I came here only to be put behind these walls. Let me help you, Anna had insisted. Please. I can't bear the idea of you or Isabel being trapped behind walls, if the witch catches you trying to help me. Or worse? His tone was morose. Absolutely not. I won't allow it. Anna balked. She didn't care for that statement. Maybe it reminded her of Bruno's brutish domineering ways, but it made her contrary. Not that Tino was anything like Bruno. He wasn't. Tino was considerate and kind and patient. She wondered what he looked like. Wondered what his hands felt like. Wondered. A heat flowed through her body. A heat she'd never felt for anyone else. Her tigress released a chuffing sound of pleasure. Stop that, Anna admonished her tigress. Anna turned the handle and entered her sitting room, then shifted into her tigress. She'd been doing that so much lately, she'd become more adept at it than ever. It was painful as always, of course, but with each shift, the process became quicker. Are you here? She tilted her head, waiting for Tino's response. Cristiano? Where else would I be? The wonderful warmth he always caused within her flooded through her body. She felt scandalously aware of his presence, but didn't feel the least sinful. How could she? Bruno was a business arrangement made by her father that she had to validate and conform to for the sake of her sister and her infirm mother. One day, she told herself, one day I'll be free of him and free to love. She pushed the thought away, because the circumstances that would lead to that were heartbreaking, for it meant that her mother would no longer be with them, and that Isabel would be off with whomever she chose as a mate. Though Anna wanted her mother to live forever, and Isabel had no interest in a mate. Looked like she was in her prison for the long haul. That doesn't mean that Tino has to be in his, though. Anna was determined she would help him, though she'd miss him. Somehow she'd set him free so he could have a life. Sadness pierced her soul with an aching fierceness, because Tino getting a life meant leaving her behind. And having a family. Which meant having a mate. She exhaled a heavy sigh. What's the most beautiful woman in the villa sighing about? Anna whirled around, trying to figure out which wall he was behind. His laugh was warm, surrounding her like heated liquid honey, pouring over her lonely soul. You weren't expecting me. You didn't call my name? Cristiano. She let out a low laugh so she wouldn't be heard by her sister or mother. In or out of their shifted states, shifters had supernatural hearing. Yes, he confessed. I was expecting you, and I did call your name. I'm sorry I'm late. I had an early morning errand to run. She couldn't tell him that part. What the errand was. Where she and Isabel went. What they were doing. Sounds mysterious. His tone was teasing. She had to deflect him. Girl stuff. She approached the wall from which it seemed his voice was coming. Cristiano? Would you mind if I touch the wall? I don't mind. But you shouldn't expect to feel anything but the cold stone that binds me. Anna reached out, hesitantly. Ever so slowly, her paws approached the unyielding brown and gray stone wall. She touched her paws to the wall and jumped back. It's warm. It's not. Touching the wall was like touching a living thing, except it was made of the hardest of stone. Cristiano, it's as if I can feel you there. Wait. Let me check something. She ran across the room to the opposite wall. Cold. She ran to a third wall. Also cold. She ran back to Tino's wall and placed her shoulder against it. Warmth, the same warmth as his voice as his presence flowed from her paws throughout her body. I feel you. Joy bubbled within her, like champagne used to bubble in her mouth when she used to celebrate New Year's Eve with her parents. I feel you. You're here.
Chapter 12. Tino's breath caught with a hitch. He felt her paws on his chest. Their heat surged through his body with as much intensity as if there wasn't a wall between them. She leaned in, her body hot against the wall, but it was as if she was pressed against him. She rose onto her back legs, pressed her tigress cheek to the wall. It was silky softness on his chest. His body reacted, hardening, his cock turning to steel within the wall's confines. His need for her was powerful. And he was powerless. His lion roared in Tino's mind. Then Tino heard the responding roar. Her tigress's passions came to life, wanting the lion as Tino wanted Anna. Then it hit Tino with the force of a tornado seeking retribution. Anna wanted him. And Anna could feel this thing between them. You feel it? He didn't pose it as a question. He knew she had to feel it. Her head nodded against the wall that held his chest. I do feel. Something caught Tino's attention. Was it a sound? Was it his lion senses? Whatever it was, something was just outside the door. Could whoever it was, listen into their conversation the way he'd listened to her conversation with Bruno that day? Hush, love. It hit him a second later he'd called her love, but this wasn't the time to dwell on that. Shift, Anna. Shift. Quickly, She'd become so adept at it, he noted, she shifted into her human form. The succulent, curvy creature he'd fallen in love with. God. He had. He'd fallen for another man's wife, mate, whatever it was called in the shifter world that he knew very little about. Anna had tried to tell him some of the rules, but it was so foreign to him, finding out there was a social and political structure of beings that were more than human. Why did I need to shift? She asked him, her eyes mirroring her concern. He couldn't talk to her. Oh sure, he could talk, but in her human form, she'd never hear him. The door handle turned. Anna whirled to face the interloper, who was intruding on their time. Isabel walked in. Can I meet him? Tino froze. Isabel knew about him? When did this happen? When had Anna told her sister? He didn't make it a practice to overhear their conversations, but it was hard to avoid most times, as he hated to leave Anna's presence, out of concern that Bruno would start in on her again. Anna ushered her sister out of the room, practically shoving her. Wait. But he knew they couldn't hear him. Not in their human shapes. Damn, he let the word out with a whoosh of air. What's next?
Chapter 13. Anna froze. She could have killed her sister. He doesn't know you know. She knew Tino heard Isabel. Of course he did, but what the hell? She steered Isabel out of the room and to the garden. What are you doing? What? Confusion was plastered to Isabel's face. I haven't told him that you know about him yet. Oh no. Then just as quickly, confusion was replaced with a smile. Now you don't have to. Impetuous Isabel. God, how that nickname from their younger days fit her today. I planned to break it to him slowly. Why? Anna contemplated that. Truth was, she didn't know why. Or maybe it was because she didn't want to share him. No, she shook her inner head. That can't be it. Could it? Oh. Isabel's face lit up, as if she'd come up with a brilliant idea. Anna frowned. Isabel's ideas worried her. Oh. I see. More lighting up on her face. Anna tilted her head. What? You are in love. Isabel clapped her hands rapidly, gleefully, then she jumped up and down and did a pirouette. No. Anna stopped her pirouette with a hand on her arm. No. No. You have it wrong. Damn it. Of course, Isabel would have figured it out. They were more than sisters. They were best friends. No. I don't have it wrong at all. Isabel hugged Anna. You are completely and totally in love with him. I saw it on your face when I entered the room. That explains it. Anna shook her head. As if denying it could make it untrue. What? Explains what? What does it explain? You wanting to save him from his prison. It's because we are friends. It's more than that. But I know you'd want to free him even if you weren't in love with him. After all, you're the one that set the goldfish free in the 2nd grade. And the hamsters free in the 3rd grade. And what about that fiasco at the zoo? Thank goodness Papa stopped you. Isabel doubled over in laughter, then straightened up and looked her sister in the eye, all seriousness. You're right. We are going to save him. We? No. Anna wouldn't have her sister visiting witch covens. Of course we. You can't go alone. Does he know? Know what? Anna felt like Isabel and the world were moving at the speed of lightning while she was ensconced in sludge. Does he know we went and talked to the witch? Like I'd tell him that I shared his story of Iniga and his father with you. I didn't have his permission yet. I'm sure he won't mind when he knows it's to help free him. Oh, he'll mind? Anna knew he would. Tino wouldn't want her endangering herself for him. So you didn't tell him we talked to Desideria? Signora Desideria was what Anna and Isabel called her less than a decade ago. One of their teachers from the private school the girls had attended. Desideria, a minor witch. She'd befriended the two tigress shifter sisters and they'd stayed in touch, though of course the sisters were no longer girls, and being friends with witches was frowned upon in the shifter world. Even if the witch had a shifter great-grandparent, and was hired by the school to teach shifters how to better prepare for interactions and conflicts with witches. No. Anna shook her head vigorously. Guess that means you didn't tell him about Desideria and Esmeralda. Anna simply shook her head. Again. Of course, she didn't tell him that Desideria had said to find Esme, as Desideria called her. That Esmeralda, Esme was the highest-powered witch on the continent. She thought of her and Isabel's recent visit to Desideria. Esme is the highest-powered witch on this continent. Or at least high-powered enough to counter Iniga's spell, Desideria said. Esme, the same name as the witch that Tino's mother had visited to have his lion repressed. That fact hadn't escaped Anna's notice. She was hoping to appeal to Esme's sense of justice in helping free Tino from Iniga's spell. When Anna had first told Desideria that Iniga was the one who'd imprisoned him, and that Tino had seen a vial and that she wanted to find the vial, Desideria had shuddered. You will never find it. Your only hope is to find a witch stronger, more powerful, one able to override Iniga using the vial's contents. Would Iniga seek retribution? This did concern Anna. She didn't want her family to pay for her decisions. Iniga is no more. She messed with the wrong witch. Then how is her spell still active? Because of the contents of the vial. Could you break her spell then? Isabel asked. Desideria laughed. No. Only one I know is Esmeralda. Another shudder. My half-sister. Hope had flourished in Anna. Can you talk to her? Tell her Tino's plight. Ha. The sound was mirthless. No. We do not speak. But I can tell you where to find her, in a province outside Rome in the forests near the volcanic cliffs. Can you be more specific? Isabel asked. No. But do be careful. That is Tiero territory, and Giovanni Tiero is very, and I mean very, 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 territorial. He has been the most resistant to change in the shifter world. And his father ran the European Shifter Council. Desideria shook her head. Do not trifle with the Tiero family. They don't play nice. I've heard of them, Isabel agreed. Have I been living under a rock? Why don't I know this? I wasn't aware, Anna murmured. They don't do publicity, Desideria affirmed. Isabel shook Anna back to the present. So are we going today? Anna shook her head. I don't know. Bruno's gone for a week, right? True, but Mama. We will have someone take care of Mama. A thought occurred to Anna again. One she couldn't seem to shake. Would she ever see Tino again after releasing him? How would she keep Bruno's advances at bay without Tino's distractions? Would she end up pregnant with Bruno's son? Images flew through her mind of younger, smaller, equally brutish miniature versions of bull shifters like Bruno, raising Cain in a playroom. A shiver touched the base of her spine, then traveled upward. It doesn't matter. Tino can't stay there. Not any longer. It's not fair to him. We'll leave tomorrow. Isabel jumped with joy. Now take me to meet your lover. Anna gave her a double take and a dirty look. Isabel cleared her throat. Sorry. Your friend. Chapter 14. How much longer? I'm not meant for trekking through woods, Isabel huffed. I'm already regretting allowing you to come along, Anna snapped. I'm sorry. I'm not a hiker. Isabel tugged on her pants, readjusting them. Her steps were heavy as they stomped through the forests in the province of Viterbo. They'd gone as far as they could by car, then they'd looked at the scribbled directions Desideria had given them. See, there's the forked tree. Not much further, Anna hissed her response. But I wish you'd lower your voice and quit stomping so loudly. She's bound to hear us and cast a spell. Maybe even turn us into trees. Or something. It was the or something part that made Anna nervous. Oh, and you'd rather sneak up on her and really piss her off? I'd sooner announce our arrival with foot stomping, so she knows our intent isn't to sneak up on her. Good point. So, wise one, what do you suggest? Anna asked Isabel playfully. I suggest you don't move. Unless you enjoy pain. A very deep, very male voice came from within the darkness of the heavily treed forest. Anna glanced into the shadows but saw nothing, not even with her supernatural shifter sight. What? Isabel whirled around, turning around and around. A creaking sound betrayed that she was beginning to shift. Tell her not to shift. We don't want to hurt her, but we will if she decides to turn into a tigress. Anna put her hand on Isabel's arm, which already was covered in a thick, downy fur. Don't, sister. Not yet. Not until we know. There's nothing for you to know. Nothing at all. Except that you are trespassing. Out from the forest strode 3 men. All with dark hair, all with dark swarthy skin, and all with a menacing predatory look on their sculpted faces. Anna glanced at Isabel, who was frozen in place, already back in her fully human form. Isabel's gaze was focused on the one in the middle. The biggest one. The meanest-looking one. We can take them, Anna whispered to her sister. If we shift quickly enough. What can 3 human males do against 2 fierce tigresses, after all? Isabel's stare didn't waver from the one in the center. The one striding confidently their way, though he was still yards off. I don't think so. She's right, Anna. Listen to your sister. How do you know my name? Under her breath, she whispered to Isabel. Why not? Shifters, Isabel hissed. Correct, the man, correction, the shifter in the center said. Anna didn't care for the grin on his face. It was too victorious. What makes him think he's got us under control? In case you ladies are having second thoughts, he indicated the man to his left. We have tranks. Though they are still experimental, I have it on good authority from personal experience that they are extremely effective. Bastard. Who are you? We have business in this area. Who are you to say we are trespassing? Who are you? Isabel echoed Anna's question, but the tone in her voice sounded far away. Anna glanced at her sister. What was up with her? You are in the middle of Tiero territory, the one on the left said. When all else fails, bluff. How do you know we don't have permission to be here? Oh God. Anna didn't care for the quick turn his smile took, straight into dangerous zone. Because I am the one who grants permission. He nodded, as though reinforcing his statement. I'm Giovanni Tiero. And you, it seems, are my guests for the evening. He indicated his companions. Tito and Federico. My brothers? What kind of manners are those? Pointing a weapon at a lady? If nothing else, Anna thought she could appeal to his sense of honor. His laughter echoed in the forest. Dark and powerful. Ladies? Your sister here, beautiful as she may be, was preparing to shift and attempt to rip us to shreds. Unsuccessfully, I might add, because, well, shifters. He pointed, first to himself, then to his brothers. A low growling sound came from Isabel. Giovanni smiled in response. I like her, he said to his brothers. As if we aren't here. Or as if we are furniture. I have business. So hurry up and give us the courtesy of your permission, Anna exclaimed. He gave her a haughty look from eyes that appeared glazed with black ice, so forbidding was his glance. You have business here? What sort of business could you have on my land that I'm not aware of? He turned that formidable stare toward Isabel. Anna wanted to quake and tremble under his expression. Not Isabel. No, that hard-headed sister of hers, foolhardy as well, released a laugh. Isabel's laugh was genuine and elicited a quizzical, brow-raised mien from the tall, broad-shouldered man. So, Giovanni Tiero, Isabel began. Our business is our own. Before Anna could blink, Giovanni Tiero had turned, making a complete 180. Take them to the main house. No sooner had the last word left his lips, 20 shifters stepped out of the shadows. All tigers. Anna glared at Isabel. Did you have to piss him off? Did you? Chapter 15. Anna sat at the window bench, staring at the dark forest that surrounded the villa. Now she had to get out of here and hunt Esmeralda down. It was the getting out of here part that worried her. She wasn't convinced that would be easy. Not with so many shifters there to reinforce Giovanni Tiero's orders. Isabel paced the room. Really? She frowned. He expects us to show up for dinner and behave casually. As if it's a dinner party. Isabel picked up one of the dozen dresses the housekeeper had brought in with the explanation. Signor Tiero is inviting you to dinner. Isabel crumpled the dress between her fists and threw it at the wall. How dare he? Isabel. Please calm down. Anna had never seen her sister so worked up. Why does this bother you? Let's have dinner with him, then let's explain our cause. I'm sure he will work with us. He may even help us. Peeved. Did you see him? He's a brute. He's You like him. Anna watched her sister in the window's reflection. Isabel stiffened, whirled. Cheeks kissed with the crimson of anger, her mouth open in a perfect elliptical shape. She snapped her lips shut. I foot stomp. Do. Another foot stomp. Not. Isabel delivered a kick to the footstool near the dresser. Ouch. She roared, a bellow that came from her tigress's pain, then turned to Anna again. Don't say that, she hissed, then flounced into the wing chair. I will make him pay for this. How dare he do this? Does he not know who we are? We're the powerless daughters of a shifter who is no longer around and delivered to Bruno for security. Bruno, who is not going to protect us. For my sake. For Tino's sake, please calm down. This is not the time to act hastily, and Giovanni Tiero is not a man to antagonize. Don't tell me what to do. I'll. Isabel's tirade was interrupted by the door opening. At the threshold stood a boy with intense eyes. A boy who was a miniature replica of the Tieros. Who are you? The boy said. Isabel crossed her arms over her chest. Who are you, little man? I'm Vittorio. My friends call me Vax. Anna rose to her feet, eager to intercept Isabel in case her sister took her rage out on the boy with the serious expression. I'm Capriana Valenti. My friends call me Anna. Can I call you Anna? He stepped closer. Of course. Anna held out her hand. The boy shook it solemnly. Don't tell my father I was here. I was curious about our new guests. It's not often we get guests. You're the second ones this week. I haven't been able to see the witch. She's confined in a different wing. Which? Who is your father? Isabel asked. Giovanni. Shush. Someone's coming. I have to go. And with that, the boy was gone. An honest question about what witch remained unanswered. He's mated. Isabel's countenance had darkened, as had her mood. What? Giovanni Tiero. That was his son. Yes. I gathered. But you're not interested. She wasn't going to tell her sister that. Because clearly there was something about that dark, menacing, formidable man that she found intriguing. Let's go to dinner. Harumph. Isabel's exhale of exasperation was telling. Too telling. Chapter 16. Giovanni, Mr. Call Me Gio, Tiero was at the head of the table. He'd placed Isabel to his immediate right, and Anna sat across from her sister to his left. Next to Anna was Federico. The seat next to Isabel held Tito. The rest of the 20-something seats at the long table were empty. Where's your crew? Isabel asked with a sneer. Surely you don't feel safe with only the three of you here. Giovanni didn't look at Isabel. In fact, his behavior was very different than earlier. Whereas at first he couldn't take his eyes off her, now he didn't even so much as glance at Isabel, and he certainly refused to take the challenge. He remained stoic, his beautiful hawk face immobile and void of expression. He had been this way through the consommé, the salad, and now through the delectable spice-rubbed roasted quail. Anna couldn't enjoy the meal. Her mind was on her mission. And on her questions. She tried to approach Giovanni with some answers. Finally he turned toward Anna, and addressed his conversation to her. Only her. What was your purpose? Anna took a deep breath. He could help her. This shifter, with all his muscle, could help her find, convince, or even coerce a witch to help Tino. Dare she ask for his assistance? First, I apologize for interloping on your territory without your permission. Isabel released a low grunt, and an even lower laughing scoff. Not low enough clearly, as a Giovanni Tiero's brows drew down to a prohibitive V. Anna kicked under the table, but her foot didn't get Isabel's. She gave her sister a dirty look, but it did no good as Isabel's eyes were trained on the pattern on her still full plate. Apology accepted. Giovanni tore off the leg of the quail. Anna's eyes widened at the ferocity with which he attacked the bird. Had she said something wrong? She didn't have the time for niceties and things like that. I need your help. He looked up from the quail's flesh. Please, she added. Giovanni gave her a single nod, set the quail down, took a napkin, wiped his fingers. What do you need help with? I have a friend. Isabel released a short giggle. Stop. Anna had enough. Her retort cut Isabel's giggle short. Sorry, Isabel mumbled, eyes still down. Why was Isabel so contrary? My friend is in. How to phrase this mess? I have a friend in trouble, and he can't be freed without the help of a witch that I've heard is in this area. Esmeralda? Tito asked. Anna snapped her eyes his way. How did you know? She's the only witch in this area, Giovanni explained. And she's unavailable. What? What do you mean? This couldn't be. She couldn't be unavailable. After all of this, after everything they'd been through. No. I don't believe it. I can't. What does unavailable mean? She's being held. Where? Isabel's tone was snide. Here. Federico said, as if it was that simple and no big deal. The answer to their problem, the solution, was right here. We need her, Anna said. I can't let her go. Giovanni's tone brooked no argument, no discussion. Can't we discuss this? Anna was ready to beg if she needed to. Oh yes, she'd beg. And plead. And even threaten. And if she needed to, she'd try to bribe. Somehow she'd find a way to get money from her father's accounts, though Bruno controlled them with a tight fist. Discuss? He glanced at Isabel finally. If your sister can contain herself. Isabel rose to her feet. Contain myself? You. Sit, Giovanni ordered. Isabel glared at him, unmoving and very definitely standing. You can't make me. You need a spanking. Such a petulant child. Oh. Is that how you treat your wife? The mother of your child? Anna gasped. Isabel was going too far. Giovanni would refuse to help them if she kept at this. Anna turned to Giovanni to apologize for her sister's actions. Only he had gone ashen. His swarthy good looks were pale, his features drawn, the earlier vibrancy vanished. Tito stood. Please sit. He addressed Isabel. My brother has lost his mate. Sit. Isabel's color faded, the anger in her face gone, replaced with the horror of her words. I'm so sorry. Isabel lowered herself into her seat, then proceeded to become as small and as inconspicuous as possible. We apologize, Anna started. Tears threatened, down deep, but she knew they didn't show yet and she wouldn't allow them to. Please? Giovanni held up a hand. I'd rather discuss the business at hand. Of course, of course. She gulped in a large breath. My friend. We need this witch to set him free. He's imprisoned in a wall. He's a shifter. Won't you help a shifter? One of our own kind. What is this shifter's name? Cristiano Ricoletti. Never heard of him. Is he related to Marco? Anna nodded eagerly. His son. Marco never mentioned a son to me. Giovanni looked at Federico and Tito. Do you know of this? Both brothers shook their heads. His lion was suppressed. By the same witch we seek. Esmeralda. His mother didn't want him to know he was a shifter. Giovanni rubbed his jaw. Very odd. You know Marco Ricoletti? You can ask him. Not so easy. He's in mourning in Sicily. Or perhaps he's in hiding. Or both. The Shifter Council has questions for him regarding his choice to take a witch as a mate. This is frowned upon. A fork dropped to the floor. Anna glanced toward Giovanni's brothers. They had exchanged a look she didn't understand. Not that it mattered. Her mission was to help Tino. Can you help? Giovanni looked toward one of the doors. Bring the witch. Moments later, a beautiful woman walked in the door. With emerald eyes and hair so red it was on fire, her gaze threw green daggers at Giovanni. Why do you disturb me? She stood before them, clad in jeans and a peasant top in pristine white. Esmeralda. Sit please. It seems your services are needed. Esmeralda released a laugh laced with sarcasm, and took a seat next to Tito. She addressed Giovanni. I'm your prisoner, yet you're talking as if I'm your guest. Anna leaned forward, pushing her plate aside. Please. It's very important. It's something you're already familiar with. That's a good way to pique my curiosity. The witch raised a red eyebrow, creases forming on ivory skin. Anna glanced at Giovanni. How she wished she didn't have to talk in front of him and his brothers. Giovanni nodded, as if urging her on, or telling her he wasn't going anywhere. You've met Ella Carrera. Esmeralda cocked her head. Perhaps. No. I know it's so. You see, her son told me about the letter she left for him. The lion shifter, Esmeralda acknowledged with a slight smile. I did his mother a favor. Yes. Anna hoped that they were able to make a connection. And she passed away. Yes, I hear of things, even though I've moved to this godforsaken forest and away from my beloved Rome. She glared at Federico across the table. How is that lion shifter doing? I suspect now he realizes what he is. Anna nodded. He knows. But he is in a predicament. And your sister said you were the only one who could help. Which sister? Desideria. Esmeralda's eyes narrowed. I hope you're not hoping a friendship with her will garner favor with me. No. No. I was hoping since you're the only witch powerful enough. I am, Esmeralda affirmed. Not very modest though. Anna bit her tongue, and didn't let her opinion be known. Yes, since you are, we were hoping you could overturn Iniga's spell. She used a bitter blood vial. Anna still wasn't sure what that vial was about, but clearly it was magical. Anna recounted Tino's dilemma, how he remained trapped behind the walls. Esmeralda rubbed her temples. Iniga isn't around anymore. Yes, that's what I heard. Anna was thankful, ever so thankful that Giovanni, his brothers, and Isabel were quiet, not antagonizing, not interfering. Lucky for you, because if she knew you wanted one of her spells countered, you'd find yourself in an unpleasant predicament. Will you help? I have to go there. I can't do that from here. Esmeralda glanced at Giovanni. Absolutely not. She'd be on the way to another continent before we could blink, Tito added. Federico remained silent. A coldness rushed through Anna. They couldn't do this. They couldn't keep Tino a prisoner. No. I refuse to believe there isn't something that can be worked out. Do you have a way to guarantee me that after Esmeralda gives you what you want, that you will in turn bring her back and not grant her freedom out of gratitude? Anna contemplated the matter. Truth was, she probably would let Esmeralda go. She was Desideria's sister, and Anna would be appreciative. Isabel said, "You could leave me behind as collateral. What's the worst that could happen?" No. Anna wouldn't agree to that. Giovanni glanced at Isabel. With laughter in his voice, he said, "What makes you think I want the pleasure of your company?" Isabel glared at him. "It's not about you." "Think of the dangers involved," Anna cajoled her. "Wait just a moment here." Giovanni tapped the table for emphasis. "Are you implying we couldn't protect your sister?" "Not from the looks you're giving her." Peeved. Isabel spurted. "I can protect myself." "Stop." Anna raised a hand. "I'm not leaving my sister behind. And more importantly, what incentive do I have now to help?" Esmeralda sat back in the leather and wood antique chair. Anna looked at her sister, then at Giovanni. She didn't even have any money to offer Esmeralda as payment. "Why are you looking at me?" Giovanni raised his brows at Anna. "Hoping to appeal to your sense of decency." Isabel burst into mirthful laughter. "Decency? Him?" Very slowly, and in a way that would have made Anna most nervous, Giovanni turned his head until his focus was fully on Isabel. "I think I will take you up on that offer. Let your sister be the collateral you leave behind. She needs a few lessons. Maybe even a spanking." His eyes glittered dangerously. "Ha," Isabel challenged. "I'd like to see you try." Giovanni didn't rise to her bait. He turned back to Anna. "Now we need to give the witch incentive." "Thank you." Anna wanted to hug him. And would have, if that formidable shifter didn't scare the daylights out of her. Giovanni turned to Esmeralda. "Well? What can you do for me?" Esmeralda wasn't going to make it easy for him, it seemed. "I can testify on your behalf with the Shifter Council. Perhaps get your charges to go away." Esmeralda contemplated the matter. "I'm hungry." Giovanni called out to the hallway. "A plate for the WI, for Esmeralda." Chapter 17. The next morning, after a healthy dose of reluctance on Anna's part, and many assertions from Isabel that she would be fine, Anna relented and let her sister have her way. She left her in Giovanni Tiero's hands with the promise that she'd be back in a day. I hope. It was the only way, Anna realized. And the Tieros didn't have a bad reputation. And they had held offices in the Shifter Council at one time or another. "I hold the stone, Esmeralda." These were Giovanni's final words to the witch before he closed the vehicle door behind her. And so it was, Anna and Esmeralda, accompanied by Federico and a dozen of Giovanni's shifters, in 2 large vehicles bound for Rome. Giovanni's shifters were part of his security team. Dressed in suits, they were burly and all business. The time back to Rome didn't take long, because they didn't have to hike through the woods the way Anna and Isabel had. The Tieros had a driveway that led straight to the road. Wish I'd known about this. It would have saved her a lot of time. Sitting alone in the middle seat with Esmeralda, Anna took a moment to visit with her. She knew their talk wouldn't be private. Shifter hearing was too good for that, but she still was curious. "What happened with you and Desideria?" "Nothing happened." "How do you know her?" Esmeralda turned from looking out the window. "She was our teacher a few years ago." "So that's the punishment they gave her. Teaching at a shifter school? I never knew." "Punishment?" Anna was confused. "Yes. She had a falling out with a superior witch. The Congress of Witches met. Then she was gone. We were never close. How is she? She's fine. What did Giovanni mean when he mentioned having a stone? One of the shifters in the back laughed. The stone that keeps her tethered. Esmeralda turned to give him a dirty look. He sat back in his seat. Whatever it was, there was no doubt he ultimately respected Esmeralda's powers. Anna chewed on her lip. So, El Carrera hired you to keep Tino's lion hidden. You already know that. Esmeralda's tone was exasperated. Yes, sorry. What can you tell me about that? Nothing. Confidentiality is valued in my business. Why are you helping me, us? You're full of questions, aren't you? Her tone was standoffish, but her expression wasn't unapproachable. Not totally, anyway. Giovanni Tiero speaking on my behalf could keep me from unpleasantness. Why would you have to deal with unpleasantness? In front of her, Federico began to cough. After a long coughing spell, he issued an apology. Anna glanced at Esmeralda, but there'd be no answer coming from her. Her head was against the window and her eyes closed. So much for that. They were in Anna's neighborhood. The driver followed her directions and took them to their home. Bruno's vehicle was still gone. She breathed a sigh of relief, ran out of the vehicle and up the stairs to the front door, burst through it, to the amazement of the housekeeper, then across the villa. First things first. Mama. In her bedroom, her mother was down for her afternoon nap. Anna leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Her mother was fine. She took the housekeeper's hand and led her to Mama's room. Please stay with Mama until I come back. I have urgent and private business to take care of in my room. Make sure Mama doesn't go wandering if she wakes up. Seeing Giovanni's security team here would cause Mama to worry. Anna couldn't have that. She ran back to the vehicles, where all were stepping out of the doors. Please. She panted, struggling for breath. Give me a moment to prepare him. He has no idea I'm doing this. We will wait outside for you, Federico said. Anna ran inside, to her sitting area, closing the door behind her quickly. She shifted immediately. Still breathless, her heart beating like a sparrow's chased by a hunting cat, she shifted into her tigress. Cristiano. She felt him join her sink, his presence a warm sensation that flooded her body. I'm here. His tone was stern. Where have you been? Do you know the worry I've had? I feared that you'd run into Bruno somewhere and been taken, and... He heaved a sigh of relief. I feared the worst had happened. And here I am, unable to protect or help you. That will no longer be the case. Not after today. Her tigress approached the wall. She leaned against it, pressing against the wall the way a house cat seeking affection would push on a leg. What do you mean? She heard him draw in a breath, and knew he was grasping her scent the way she wished she could take his in, deep in her lungs. Damn the witch that did this to him. Damn her. It would soon be undone, though. It would. I have good news. Do tell. And where is Isabel? Don't tell me the good news is that Isabel found someone. Anna laughed. Quite the opposite. She made an enemy, I think. Though their dynamics are strange. Then again, my sister is different. So your news, he prompted. I've found someone to lift the spell that binds you here. Really? Her heart ached at the excitement in his tone, because she knew that it would mean the end of their friendship. There was no way Bruno would allow her to have a man for a friend. And her feelings for Tino, those were more than friendship. Yes, really. Do I have the option to refuse this? Why would you? Because it would mean losing you. She sighed, her heart swelling with joy and deflating with sadness both at the same time. You shouldn't do that. This is your chance. Who knows when there will be another. How did you make this happen, miracle maker? It's a long story, involves a witch. Can it wait until after? She's here. Outside. Waiting. You mean it will happen now? She's really here? Excitement was back in his voice. She is. She shifted into her human form, then said, "And I'll be right back with her." She didn't want him to change his mind or argue with her. And if she was in her human form, he could hear her, but she couldn't hear him. Unless he shook the walls. "Please don't shake the walls," she pleaded silently as she slipped out the door and ran outside and down the stairs toward the waiting Esmeralda and shifters. "Let's go. We're ready." She grabbed Esmeralda's arm and tugged. "You are more than friends. That much is clear," Esmeralda mumbled. Shifter hearing. "I heard that," Anna reminded her. "I know." They all went inside. Anna led them to her sitting room, confident that Tino would still be there. "Tino, this is Esmeralda. She will be helping us." Esmeralda looked at Federico and the other shifters. "I'd like privacy." "Can I stay?" Anna pleaded. "You will have to stay out of the way." "I will. I'll be right here by the window." Anna closed the door behind the departing shifters and detoured toward the chair. "If you don't mind, I don't like performing in front of an audience." "Seriously? I understand. Anything to get Esmeralda going. Anything." Anna kept her eyes glued on the window, too keyed up to enjoy the view of the backyard with the topiaries and statues that their landscaper had put in place. "Tell me when I can turn around." "I will." "Silence, please." Esmeralda's tone was terse. Anna heard a commotion. Men shouting. It seemed that they were near the front door. She was itching to go check to make sure everything was okay, but she couldn't bring herself to leave the room. She kept her eyes glued to the greenery outside, not even trying to look in the reflection. She couldn't afford to anger Esmeralda and have her back out of this arrangement. She heard a cracking sound and almost turned. Almost. She fought the urge to turn by digging her nails into her palms. "Anna?" Her name sounded broken up, as if coming from a dried husk of a throat. Of course, he hadn't spoken out loud since he'd been put in there. But, oh my God. His voice. It sounds almost the same as it had in sync. She whirled around. There he stood. Everything she'd ever thought a man should look like, and everything a lover could be. And her dear friend. She feasted on his image, drinking him in like a woman who'd been wandering in a desert for a lifetime. Cristiano. He looked like she'd imagined he'd look. Well, if you want to consider that, the only thing she'd imagined was a vague, sexy image. Tino had dark brown hair buzzed close to his scalp. He had been coming to meet and hopefully impress his father. Tall frame, broad shoulders, wide chest, his jawline was square, his eyes dark, the color of wet espresso grounds. She held her breath at the sheer beauty of the man. He looked as if he had no idea how positively sexy he was. She could tell just from looking at him.
Chapter 18. Cristiano breathed deeply. He knew what she looked like. He'd always known. But this, he savored her scent, relishing an aroma that was uniquely her. And she belongs to another man. Even if he's not much of a man. He glanced at the red-haired witch. "Thank you, Esmeralda." He barely managed the phrase. It looked like he'd have to get used to talking again. He took a step away from the wall and stumbled, seeking stability from the dresser next to the wall. He steadied himself. "It's really true. I'm free. After all this time. I'm free." Anna was frozen in place, staring at him. How he wanted to run to her, to hold her to his body, to feel her against him. There was a knock at the door, interrupting his thoughts. Probably a good thing, since she belongs to Bruno. "Everything okay in there?" Federico's voice. Esmeralda opened the door. "Everything is fine. My part is done." Federico studied Tino. Federico Tiero. He approached Tino and held out his hand. Cristiano. Tino was stumped. He was a shifter's son. He should use his father's name. Cristiano Ricoletti. Federico nodded. I've met your father. I wish I could say the same. Tino merely acknowledged the proclamation with a nod. Esmeralda poked her head out the door. I heard a commotion. Yes. That. Federico rubbed his jaw. We had a problem. I'm not sure, well. More jaw rubbing. Tino watched Anna watching Federico. What is it? She asked. We were attacked. Unexpectedly. And we had to defend ourselves. Anna's eyes widened. What do you mean? A bull shifter. Bruno Virgo. He attacked us. We tried to talk to him. There was no reasoning with that shifter. A long exhale, then he's dead. Tino wished he could have felt bad for what he was hearing. He couldn't. He'd seen too much of Bruno Virgo. He knew what he was about. He reached out to Anna. She crumpled into his arms. I know I should feel grief. Hush, cara mia. Hush. You should not, Esmeralda said. He did not have a reputation as a good man. With a glance at Anna, Federico added, he was your mate. By my father's arrangement. Another commotion and voices came from the other side of the hallway, toward the back of the villa.
Chapter 19. That's my mother's voice. Anna pulled herself from Tino's arms and ran out the door, with Tino closely on her heels. She was still reeling from the idea that her tormentor was dead. She wasn't one to wish death on anyone, but now she was free of Bruno's attacks and advances. She ran toward her mother. Mama. Mama glanced at her. You worried me when you weren't home last night. I'm sorry, Mama. I had to run an errand. Did that errand involve your sister being dropped off or lost? No, Mama. Anna's face burned. Some kind of caretaker of her family she turned out to be. I'm sorry. Isabel is... Federico stepped forward. Your younger daughter is a guest at our villa, Signora. He held out his hand. Federico Tiero. I'm a friend of Isabel and Anna's. Young man, Mama began. Oh no. Anna knew that tone all too well. I may be old, but I'm not deaf, blind, nor senile. Yes, Signora. Federico backed up, giving Anna a glance. A look of chagrin was on his face. Step forward. Mama pointed at Tino. Tino approached her, as she indicated for the housekeeper to wheel her closer. You're the one who has been making things fall from the walls. I have. And you're the one that talks to my daughter through the walls, when she takes on her tigress's form. Anna gasped. Tino nodded, confusion on his face. Mama smiled. You two are not the only ones who can shift. I have much better function of my legs in my tigress form. By the way, listening in isn't difficult. Yes, Signora, Tino said. Mama turned to Federico. Did I hear you correctly? That worthless bull is dead? He is. Federico nodded. Good riddance. He's been drugging me, you know. Sedatives, to keep me from acting out, as he put it. He said if I didn't take it, he'd make life a living hell for Anna. Oh, Mama. Anna rushed to her mother, lowered herself and put her forehead against her mother's. I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Your father wasn't well. He made a bad decision. I quit taking the drugs that Bruno left for me long ago, but I had to fake it, until I could come up with a plan. Mama looked at Tino, then Esmeralda, then Federico. This worked out better than any plan I could have come up with. Anna kissed her mother's cheek, then pulled away. I'm afraid I've been a disappointment. No such thing, Mama assured her. Now tell me what your sister is really doing. Esmeralda stepped forward. She's collateral. For me. So that I would return. Then let's go get my daughter. Anna stared at her mother. This was the mother she grew up with. This wasn't the shell of a woman who'd become a widow, and it wasn't the woman who'd yielded to Bruno's bullying. She let a tiny smile appear on her face. She was so proud of her mama. Cristiano, Mama said. I expect you'd like to accompany us to the Tiero household? Indeed. Federico. You'll have your men take care of Bruno's body, since he was felled by yours? And have 2 of them go to the shifter council to explain what has happened here, so that my family has no problems with legalities. I'm sure it's safe to say that my daughter has regained her father's stolen fortune now, as Bruno's widow. Let us go out the back, Anna said. She had no will to see Bruno's body. I'll have the vehicles brought around. Federico indicated to one of the shifters with a wave. Chapter 20. I'm staying. Isabel planted her hands on her hips. What do you mean you're staying? Mama indicated, for one of the Tiero security team, to push her closer to Isabel. They'd taken the drive, and now were in the driveway of the Tiero villa. Giovanni Tiero stood behind Isabel. Anna still found him as scary and as fierce as she had the first time she met him. How could Isabel want to stay here? It's not open to discussion. Please send my things. Giovanni stepped forward. Signora Valenti. I admired your husband. I hope you'd consider being our guest for dinner this evening. Perhaps spending a few days of relaxation. Federico told me what happened at your home. My security team will handle the cleanup and are visiting with the council per your request. My home could be a good place to rest for a few days, until everything is settled. Mama's eyes narrowed. Perhaps a short visit. Maybe a day or 2. Then I have to get back to Rome and sell that godforsaken villa that held all of us prisoner. Or maybe I'll have it razed and build something better on it.
Chapter 21. The shifters had all dined together, then gone to their separate quarters, in different wings and different floors. Anna's room was next to Tino's, connected by a door. It wasn't long after she'd gone to her room, changed into a nightgown, when there'd been a knock on their mutual door. She'd opened it to Tino's smiling face. Why does it feel like I've always had him in my life? Like we've always been close. Capriana, he murmured. She fell into his arms, as if she'd done it 1,000,000 times before, resting her head on his muscular chest. Bellissima, you are my love. His breath tickled the hair at her temples. And you mine. And I've known it since I met you, though I've denied it to myself. Hours later, after they'd talked and talked, relishing the ability to speak to each other while gazing into one another's eyes, Tino ran his fingertips over Anna's flesh. Goosebumps rose from the trails of his touch. Would this ever change? Would there ever come a time when his touch didn't affect her so? She prayed not as she studied his dark golden gaze, his lion flaring up to meet her tigress. She knew Giovanni didn't approve of her relationship with Tino. Gio, as he preferred to be called, was staunch in the old-school beliefs that likes should mate with likes. Tigers with tigers, lions with lions, and never ever with humans. Though Gio didn't approve, he never said anything. Probably because he didn't want to upset Isabel. Anna knew her relationship with her sister would be strained because of this. They'd not be able to hang around as much. Probably wouldn't anyway, not if she's going to stay out here, and I'm going to Florence. She knew that Tino missed Florence. She'd go there for a while. Anna would go where Tino went. She and her tigress were firm on that. What are you thinking? Tino locked eyes with Anna, taking her chin in his hand. Her heartbeat sped. She felt the warmth coming off his body in waves. A heat that carried the scent of him, the sex of him, straight to her senses, her hormones, and her tigress. Her palms grew sweaty, and tiny beads of perspiration sprouted on her hairline, just above her temple. She stared into those dark espresso eyes, glittering with the flames of his lion's gaze. His hand traveled from her chin, to her shoulder, to her back, and though he didn't apply any pressure at all, she found herself pressing closer to Tino. Her fingers curled into her sweaty palms. She wanted him too fiercely. The scent of her was powerful. The heat that rose off her body was sending Tino to the place where he could only think with his lower half. And he was getting harder and harder, stone that wanted nothing more than to take her, claim her. He wanted to brand her body with his, so deeply inside her that she shouted for him. Quicker than he'd expected her to move, she wound her arms around his neck and brought his head down. Her mouth locked onto his with a ferocity and greediness that tempted his line. She pulled him in, her tongue entering his mouth seeking. Something snapped in Tino. He reached for her, and before he could stop his line, unsheathed his claw and shredded her dress, parting it cleanly so it dropped to the floor. Anna whispered a moan, but the scent she released was revealing her desire. He lowered his hands, letting them run down the sides of her until he had her waist firmly in his hold. Her eyes remained locked with his. Her gaze focused on his mouth. He leaned back and appraised her body, those amazing breasts he'd seen once before, just that once before he'd withheld and respected her. Beautiful thighs held tightly together. He placed a thumb on her nipple and was rewarded with a tightening of puckered flesh. I want you. I want to taste you. He put a hand on the inside of each knee and pressed. Open your legs for me. Her breathing was rapid and erratic. His lion picked up on it. Her pulse beat quickly in his lion's ear. With her legs fully spread, he tugged on her panties and with the same claw split them down the sides. He let go of the material. The white cotton framed her succulent slickness with its triangle of dark hair. Her eyes were wide, as if she couldn't believe this was him, this was her, and that they were here doing this. And yet, as unbelievable as she might have found this, her sleek sheath still radiated its heat and sent out her scent, beckoning to him. Her heart was beating faster and faster in his shifter ears. Tino, please. He knew she'd never had pleasure from Bruno. Bruno took. Bruno never gave. Tino spread her lush dark red and dusky pink lips with one hand. Look at that. How wet you are for me, cara mia. He slid a finger into her. She tightened around it, making him wish it was his rod, making his lion roar in his head so loudly that Tino couldn't see for just a moment. All he could do was close his eyes against the volume. He pushed his finger in farther and felt her body's response to him. Moisture, slick and creamy, coated his finger. He pulled it out just halfway, watching how her lips wrapped around it, watched how her body held onto his finger, unwilling to let it go. Her eyes fluttered, closing, then opening. A glow behind them showed him her tigress, just barely beneath the surface. His lion recognized the tigress, making low chuffing sounds in Tino's head. He slipped his finger back in, enjoying the way her body sheathed it. He pushed in and out. Her body arched forward, hungrily taking more of what he offered, clear to his largest knuckle. He slid another in, relishing the way she stretched to receive him, noting the way her eyes widened as he pushed the thickness in and curled it upward. Her scent wafted, stronger and sexier than before. His body strained for her. Tino groaned with need. He pushed back the lump in his throat. He needed to control himself. This was for her, not for him to take what he needed. She'd had enough of that. Way too much of that. He had to give her what he wanted her to have, what she needed. His other hand crept up from her knee, found her tiny core between her lips, and released it from its hood. He took it between his fingertips, teasing it. She writhed, her hips moving back and forth. Her muscles flexed, drawing him in, taking his fingers in deeper. He moved his hand with a speed that only a shifter could, so fast it was a blur as he drove his fingers in and out, while his other hand ministered to her sensitive core, pushing her closer and closer to an orgasm. Anna arched her body. She moaned, a low sound that became a howl, her body tensing completely taut. With one final jerk, she cried out his name. He raised his hand to her face, traced his fingers over her lips, coating their glorious fullness with her juices. He licked his fingers clean of her creaminess. I savor the moment I can make love to you properly. Anna sighed. They slept next to one another, on her bed in Giovanni Tiero's villa, and every so often one or the other would wake up and reach for each other, making sure, even in the depths of slumber, that nothing had changed. That they were still together. The next morning, Tino woke to catch her watching him while he slept. Sneaky, he said with a smile, kissing her tan-colored cheek, relishing the pink blush that he knew was because of him. I was thinking. He planted a series of kisses on her jawline, traveling up her cheek to that sensitive spot just under her ear. I should see my father. She raised herself on one elbow. He's in isolation. Tino frowned. How do you know this? Giovanni told me the first night I met him when I asked for his help. Why is he in isolation? He's mourning, I think. And hiding. Mourning. Me. Hiding. From me. No. Anna put her arms around him. Held him tightly. His witch wife Iniga is dead. And he broke shifter practice by becoming involved with a witch. It seems the council would like to talk to him about that. Shifters are very rigid in their customs. Tino shook his head. He wasn't sure he agreed with all the customs and taboos. Mostly here in Europe. It's far more old school here. In other countries, things are different. Many of them are more accepting. Seems I have a lot to learn of shifter ways. You'll pick it up. In time. I wonder if my father even wants a son, Tino said. Don't say that. He doesn't know about you. Tino shook his head. We'll see. But first, Florence. Anna nodded.
Epilogue. Florence. A few months later. Anna had come to love it here, though she almost never saw Isabel. And Mama only visited every few months for a few weeks. Mama had set up her own home. She'd done exactly what she'd said she was going to do. She demolished the villa that held them prisoner and built a new, modern, whitewashed home that she entertained a few friends in occasionally. She'd even had a cousin move in, so she had more than enough company. Anna stretched in the bed, enjoying the sun's rising rays as they warmed her body. She reached out, wrapping her arms around Tino. His eyes were fixed on her, almost predatory. I want you. Tino leaned forward, pulling her panties from her body, leaving her with the nightgown and nothing more. With her lips spread wide, the coolness of the night air still lingering was exhilarating on her wet, swollen lips. Anna enjoyed the way his eyes feasted on her. She'd enjoyed the way his fingers filled her, and the way she'd come undone all over his face. Her body was convulsing inside, knowing how he could make her feel, wanting more. His face grew closer and closer to her mound. She held her breath in anticipation of his approach. He swiped his tongue over her lips first. Up one side, then up the other, always meeting toward the center, just below the center of her pleasure. A surge pushed her to another level, making shivers course over her body. Her inner thighs trembled. Each lick he made, each breath he blew on her, all were a caress on her swollen lips. His tongue swiped between her inner folds. She made fists of her hands, wanting him. Not his tongue. Needing Tino. Needing Tino more than she'd ever needed anything. He drove his tongue in deeply, his face buried in her, his face touching her while his tongue penetrated, driving in and out. She arched her back, her hands drove into his flesh as he replaced his tongue with two fingers, not waiting, not gentle, plunging them in as though he knew exactly what she wanted but wasn't quite going to deliver it, not without a bit of teasing. Her world exploded like a million flares had been shot. She shook and opened her mouth to yell when he raised his head, his fingers moving quickly in and out of her. His mouth landed on hers, claiming her with his tongue while she came undone, becoming nothing more than jelly in his hands. She tasted the heady flavor of her own passion, driving her deeper into the depths of no return. She couldn't breathe, as her body submitted her to the climaxes. She held on to Tino, screaming into his mouth, begging him for help when the sensations felt like they were more than she could handle. Now Tino could make her his. She wound her arms around his neck. He pulled his hardness out of his briefs, rubbed her wetness from his fingers all over, grabbed her by the waist and pulled her against his shaft. He wasn't small, he knew it, and the last thing he wanted was to cause her pain. He guided into her, slowly, not wanting to hurt her. She wrapped her legs around his waist and grabbed his butt, fingers digging into his flesh. She stilled, absorbing the pleasure and the pain of their connection, then arched her hips and began a slow rocking. Tino shredded her nightgown, courtesy of his lion's claws, and freed her breasts. He leaned in, taking a nipple in his mouth, sucking on it, then replaced his mouth with his hands tweaking and teasing. He bit down on his lip. He was going to lose it. All that time prisoner behind stone walls. He wasn't sure how long he could last. She swayed on him, taking him, releasing him over and over, her sleekness enveloping him. He pulled her closer and began to move, increasing the speed. He felt the tightness of her building orgasm. Her sheath grabbed him, pulled him deeper. His control was... Tino erupted. He wasn't sure what happened next, but he thought his lion took control. He dropped his head and sunk his canines into her, just where her neck met her shoulder. She screeched, half pleasure and half pain, while he licked the wound clean. "You..." Anna began. "What?" The word came out with a groan. "You bonded us," she gasped. "What?" He pulled back, studied her face. What had he done? "Ah, Cristiano. You didn't know. And I didn't think to ever discuss it with you. What we did, when you bit me, while we were doing what we were doing. That establishes a couple bond. It means we will be together. Forever." He was perplexed. "But we will be together forever." She nodded. "Yes, it's just that." She shook her head. "I should have told you in advance about the couple bonding. Would you have told me so that I didn't ever do it? To warn me from doing it?" Her face grew sad. "No." She placed a kiss on his jawline. "To tell you to be sure when you did. You would be stuck with me." Tino laughed and licked at her bottom lip, tracing the fullness with his tongue. "I want to be stuck with you. Forever." "You have no idea. You already are, and it's more than the couple bond." She laughed. "You didn't notice a difference in my scent? Now that you mention it. What caused it? More like who caused it. Our baby." "What?" Tino leapt to his feet, standing on the bed, fully naked. He bounced up and down. "I'm going to be a father. The best father ever." He nodded, then settled next to her on the bed, his palm resting on her abdomen. "When?" 7 months. "If it's a boy, we will name it after your father to honor him." Tears sprang to Anna's eyes. "And if it's a girl, after your mother." Tino looked away. The emotions were too much. It seemed like yesterday he'd lost his mother, but so much had happened. And now he had Anna. And they would have a baby. Perhaps he was better off not seeing his father. Perhaps it would bring up memories he didn't want. Maybe his father had other children with Iniga. That thought hadn't occurred to Tino until this moment, but that could be a possibility. "Hopefully you get the son you want, Marco Ricoletti. You look sad." Anna pulled on his hand. "Let's watch the sun as it rises and gives new hope for a new day." New hope for a new day. Tino liked the sound of that. He stood behind Anna, her back pressed into his chest and abdomen. Wrapping his arms around her, he found her hands cradling her belly. He interlaced his fingers with hers. "Capriana, my savior. Cristiano, my everything." Tino felt her sigh with contentment. He relaxed for the first time in a long time. He watched the sun's brightness. He couldn't get enough of the sun these days. And he would continue to drink his fill of the sun, of life, and of the presence of his soulmate. Forever, he whispered to the sun before him and the stone walls behind him.
Thank you for listening. This has been a Shifters Forever Worlds book by L. Thorne. Stay tuned for more episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and to ring the bell to be notified of new releases.